Okay. Wow. We're really doing this.
We are here in this lovely studio that just looks so amazing.
Yeah.
This is very LA too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm your host, Allison, and I'm calling you my resident guest
Yeah.
because I would say that the reason that we're here is because of the conversations that we have.
Yes.
And I think we had one too many where it was like, we have to do this as a podcast. And I think
Got you. Yeah.
we challenge each other. So that's what we're doing. We're doing it big. We're doing it real.
Just walking into a podcast, like,
Yeah, that's how we
we've been
roll.
watching too many of these and it's like, we could do that.
Yeah.
So
And
here we
I
are.
I love our conversations, and that's actually how the name of the podcast Into Me I See came up, because the intimate conversations that we've had.
Yeah.
And I'm really grateful to do this.
Yes.
So, like I said, I'm Allison. I would love if you would tell the story
Yeah.
of how we met.
So I'm George, everybody. And Allison and I met, believe it or not, on the infamous dating apps, specifically on Hinge. And for me, it took me a while to kind of hop on the dating apps. I had kind of out of a long-term relationship, so I was just kind of feeling it out. And Allison and I matched, and we met for ice cream. And the one thing that I noticed from our initial reaction is it didn't take long for us to talk about like honest things about our past.
Mhm.
And there was a comfort level that I was like, oh, this is new, because I think a lot of times on the dating apps you try to there's a lot of anxiety, and you try to, from a male perspective, um, make sure everything is. You might try to be a little bit more than who you are, and it's not really a space in the first interaction to be open and talk about your true, honest background.
Yeah, we talked
And
about some real stuff right off the bat. And we weren't drinking. It was like the
yeah,
middle of the day.
ice cream.
Ice cream.
Highly recommend ice cream on the first interaction.
Yeah.
And it was a beautiful day, sunny.
And time frame wise, I think this was like July 2020. So,
Yeah,
yep.
yeah. Wow, time is flying.
Yeah.
In Minneapolis, where we're
Where we're
kind of both
from.
from.
Yep.
Yeah, we're
Yeah.
from the Midwest.
Yeah.
Out here in LA, doing the thing, and Allison and I had. I think our relationship had a lot of. It was a very windy road, and one of the things that I'm really grateful for, and I'll kind of let you talk about our transitions, but we decided to not necessarily pursue a romantic side of the relationship, and we valued what we were talking about,
Mm-hmm.
and it was a very almost sacred acknowledgement.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought to myself, like, who else in the world can I talk to about the things that I'm currently going through? And you were a very good sounding board for me, and I sought refuge in our conversation. So I think our decision to remove the romantic side of things really allowed us to dive deeper into each other, and that's why I think now, over the couple years of our conversations, like, you know, things about me that not many people know, and I feel like I'm in the same boat for you.
Yeah. I think one of the things that you said to me recently was, every time you leave a conversation with me, there's something that you think about, or there's
Yeah,
something that you like have to kind of massage, or that there's something that you have that provides more insight. And I think I feel the same way about you. Today we're talking about self intimacy.
yes,
So intimacy with ourselves. And I would love to hear what you would define that as, or what your experiences have been in that realm.
yeah. So I think in the beginning, so I was in a multi-year relationship and got engaged and eventually called it off. But through that period, kind of the final stages of it, my partner and I had gone through therapy, and that was my first real experience in therapy, and it was very eye-opening. I think that is that is a much needed piece of life that I think a lot of folks are losing out on,
Mm-hmm.
especially men.
Mm-hmm.
And it just provided a safe space to get things off your chest without the gearing up for the battle or the argument. And through that, I realized I was just able to think a little more clearly. And at the end of that engagement, there was definitely a dark period where I just had time to sit with myself. Uh, I'm in an apartment where it's like, oh my gosh, I'm in here alone now, and there's all this space,
Different energy. Yeah.
but at the same time, it's very familiar. You like turn the corner and it's like, oh, this is where we used to stand and
You
eat
feel like a
breakfast.
piece is missing, but you also
Yeah,
feel like super free.
yeah, definitely.
You're like, I hate this, but thank
Walking
God.
around in the drawers, just feeling free. But at the same time, yeah, that big piece is missing. And I thought to myself, like, how am I going to feel this? How am I going to find myself again? And
did you feel like you made like a concerted effort or decision where you're like, okay, I need to change, or I need to evolve, or I need, like, did it feel like a click, or was it a...
No, it honestly felt like just it was just this emptiness that I just didn't know what to do with. And I'm a very kind of calm by nature person, so I was like, oh, this will pass.
That's why we balance each other out.
And yeah,
because I'm not calm.
Yeah, Allison is type A,
You got a
capital
fire
A,
sign.
capital A. Yeah, and I'm an Aquarius, and so I'm much more like in the wind, and I go with the flow. But this one, I just couldn't shake the feeling of like, who am I now? And fortunate for me, I had, I'm one of the individuals in my friend group that provides counsel and can have those deep, honest conversations. Friends hit me with some real things, and I just kind of have real conversations to let them know that I'm here for them. But at the same time, this isn't going to be a comfort situation. Like, we're going to dive into what's actually going on. And I had some friends do that for me. And I'm one that I don't take compliments well. They almost bounce off of me because I don't feel like I don't feel like I deserve them. And that's a whole
we'll get into that
phase that is currently working through. But simple things like, George, just because that didn't work out doesn't mean you're not worthy of love. Just because that didn't work out doesn't mean that all is over, all is lost.
Did you journal, or do you feel like it's just...
I did.
Okay.
I did. And actually, one of the things that before the actual breakup or severance, I wrote all the thoughts on this giant piece of paper and left it for my partner to see. And so I did feel like I was able to get a lot of things out. And throughout that process, I also saw where a lot of my issues and flaws were. And so it's like, okay, well, these are some things that I can work on. But I also had this sense of, even though I felt like all was kind of lost, I knew that this was needed, or I have the now tool set to be an even better partner in the future when I'm ready to.
But that's pretty rapid progression, because
yeah,
I mean, my story specifically, so I mean, there's two parts to this. One is something that I've shared with you, which I think is just like so funny, and the dots connect, and this is why I am the way I am. But when I was 12 years old, I entered this contest for pens, Jelly Roll pens. And
Jelly Roll.
And it was like a writing contest.
Yeah.
And you got to pick a word and then provide context around that word. And the word that I picked at 12 years old was intimacy, which is wild. 12 years old. And my quote was, intimacy is being comfortable with someone rummaging through your soul.
Rummaging?
Rummaging. At 12.
Do that word at 12? Hold on. Were you a spelling bee champ too?
I was actually in 4th grade.
Oh, okay, of course.
I'm a terrible speller now, but yeah, I peaked in 4th grade with spelling. But the dots have connected now as I look back of how interested I was, and almost like relentless at what intimacy means. And I think I've spent a lot of my life exploring who I am, and for me, intimacy is coming up to those things that feel really uncomfortable or that you don't necessarily like about yourself.
Yeah.
When you're faced with the realization, you're like, damn, this is who I am. And then you're faced with, do I want to continue? I mean, my biggest saying in life is, what you allow will continue.
That's real.
So there's a lot of things that I have come up with against when I'm finding myself, when I'm getting to be more intimate with myself, and I'm faced with the decision, the choice
Mhm.
of, do I want to continue being like this?
Yeah.
And I think one of those things, so a real quick synopsis is, I'm laying down intimacy at 12 years old. I know what that is. And then I think I kind of got in the fast track of like adolescence and just trying to fit in, and went
Yeah.
to college and met a guy. And I was in, like we said, from the Midwest. It's a pretty traditional,
Yep. If you're not married by
yeah,
23, 24 with the kids in the
that's the
house, it's like,
pipeline.
what's wrong with you?
Yeah, that's the
Yeah.
pipeline. So I ended up marrying my college sweetheart, and 5 weeks after I got married, I had a panic attack,
Mm.
like a full blown. I mean, now I can identify that it was a panic attack, but I just didn't know what was happening.
Yeah.
I like couldn't breathe. I felt like beside myself, and I wasn't in immediate danger. So I was like,
Yeah.
mentally, it was like I was panicking.
Yep. Yep.
And, very quickly from there is when I started going to therapy. And I think it's so interesting that you also went to therapy in like a very dark place. I wish that we got into therapy when things were less chaotic,
Yeah.
or that you're in this place of like dire straits,
Yep.
but I don't think that that's necessarily how it happens. But I was led to therapy when I was realizing very quickly that the life that I was on the track felt very unaligned to who I deeply knew. And I didn't necessarily know deeply what that was,
Mhm.
but I knew that it was not in congruence with each other.
Yeah.
And it was about a year and a half of uncovering that. So my therapist gave the example of, you built this infrastructure or this structure around your soul, and
Okay.
all of that scaffolding is not true to who you are. So you
Mm.
have to take that scaffolding down.
Mm.
And when I was left with taking the scaffolding down and realizing that the foundation was, like I said, you're confronted with that decision,
Yeah.
I knew that that wasn't who I
Not your
wanted to
true
be.
self. Yeah.
And so,
Did you go to therapy with your partner, or
I
was that
did.
solo? Okay.
I went to therapy by myself, and then we also went to couples therapy.
Okay.
And, we'll obviously share more about this, but our split was incredibly amicable and respectful. And
Yeah.
it really allowed me to, unfortunately, do the really, really dirty work
Mhm.
of getting down all the way down to
Yeah.
that foundation.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and
That's
it's next month, it'll be 10 years since I've got divorced.
wow.
So this past 10 years, I would say the first 3 years were real touch and go there,
Yeah.
really building up what that foundation is. But for the last 7 years, I think it definitely has been bumpy still, but it's been a lot clearer in the sense that, okay, this is what I'm doing.
Mhm.
I'm discovering myself, and I find great joy in it. That doesn't mean that it's not painful,
Yeah.
but
Exactly.
I love knowing myself more and more. Like every day I'm like, "Oh, that's a part of you.
Mhm.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Wow, you made that decision, and you've made that decision 7 times now and you're still making it." And so it's those
Mhm.
like gratefulness, but also I'm like kind of unrelenting in growth and progress, and continuing to build that scaffolding. So,
Yeah. I think one of the important pieces for me in general is honesty, right? And
mm,
especially honesty with yourself. So I think in the sense of intimacy, that's really where it starts, because if you start operating based off of like the feelings or what you think should be happening or your expectations, that could send you on a whole different
mhm,
tangent. And you'll eventually have to do the work to come back to, let's sit down and really talk about what's going on here. And like you said, you're going to uncover some things that are uncomfortable
mhm,
and things that you're going to have to work through. And another moment for me was actually getting on the dating apps.
mm,
It took me, my brother actually helped create the profile for me, because when I started dating my partner, I was in college. And this was, yeah, about a little over 10 years ago. And so the dating apps weren't really a thing then. And I was with her for, several years. And so I missed that whole wave of Tinder and all the
Did
apps.
you get a little jealous? You're like, "I got in this relationship, and now look at all the
I mean,
sea of swiping."
it was a whole new world, and one that I was so lost in because that was the way of, like, courting, and I'm a much more in real life
Mhm, mhm.
individual, and, like, how do I how's this profile? How do I create it? What do I say? What
Yeah.
pictures do I choose? And at the same time, you wanna, obviously attract someone, so you're going to naturally put your
Mhm.
best. It took me days to just choose the. I don't know. You get 5 photos or something like that. I was like, I need one with like style. I need one, showing the physical.
I still
Uh,
remember the photo that I saw in your profile, and I was like, "Okay." But
yeah,
even now knowing you now,
yeah,
it's
yeah,
like that profile is just I mean, leave dating apps aside because that's a whole 'nother
yeah,
issue, but
yeah.
the who you are as a person, you cannot encapsulate
No,
in prompts and photos.
not at all,
Yeah.
not at all. And then I think there's a each dating app has a type of crowd that it draws,
Yeah.
right? And so my brother kind of broke it down like, okay, Tinder is kind of like down
Mm.
and dirty, like he's trying to get it in. And you kind of have to, he said, put a little bit more work into it, right?
Mhm.
Because you have the props and it just allows more space for, I think, honesty. But as I'm writing this profile, I remember thinking to myself, well, I'm starting from ground zero. So let's put it all on the table. And as I was going on dates and meeting women, I made it a point to just start with my story. And that honesty I noticed was drawing women in. I mean, I remember sitting at the dinner table and I was having dinner with somebody, and literally her hair had got into her food just because she was leaning so far
She's
forward.
so engaged with
And I was just
those.
like, what is, and I was thinking to myself, like, okay, is this rare? Right? Or do men really talk about their background and their past in the highs and lows? Because I mean, when you imagine meeting somebody and they say, "Yeah, I just got off a long-term relationship, called off the engagement, don't know what I'm doing right now, trying to figure it out." And at that point, I was like, okay, if somebody can handle that and withstand that, okay, this is somebody that I can at least be friends with. And that was my approach. Can we at least be friends? Because I need to be able to joke. I need to be able to feel comfortable. And it's hard to feel comfortable with someone that you're trying to woo, right? Because it takes on a facade and you have to kind of put on a show in some cases.
Mhm.
So I was like, okay, if they can handle the real,
Did you
then
go into these dates, like, knowing what you wanted to talk about? Or, like, how far along were you in being, like, true to yourself? Or, like, were you
as soon as they said, "Tell me about yourself," oh, you want to know? I got a story for you.
You do.
One of my lines too was like, I was like, yeah, I used to tell people, I was like, yeah, I'm in about like my third life. This is my third life right now. I had some phases,
Uh-huh.
and this one is kind of starting from scratch. And I think once I gave that information out, in some cases they would tell me a lot about what they went through in their past.
Mhm.
And then I could really decipher like, okay, is this somebody that I could be honest about continuing this relationship, or can this grow into something versus, all right, this is going to be super shallow. And then do I just want to, you know, just do the physical side of this,
Mhm.
or do I cut this off? And ghosting was something that I thought I knew what ghosting was, but until you get on these apps and you go on a date with somebody and you'll think it like really went really well and you'll send a couple texts later and it's just like no noise. Because I think the apps allow for a space of, you don't really have to be committed. You don't really have to dive all the way in, because that silence kind of speaks volumes. And there's a comfort level with it, almost like it's accepted,
Oh, it's
to
accepted,
kind
but
of
I
ghost.
think that ghosting for me is one of the things that triggers when we talk about, like, knowing yourself and intimacy with yourself. I think ghosting is one of those things that happens to me that I have to dig deeper
Yeah.
into who I am and what I know to be true because it feels very, um it feels mean. It
Mhm.
feels it like I'm like, we're all adults here. So like,
Right.
can you just say, "Hey, not interested. Best of luck." Like
Yeah.
I need that, and obviously that's attached to some of my
Yeah.
attachment issues, but I think to your point of like honesty, I've always said or I've said for a while now, I can handle anything as long as it's the truth.
Yeah.
And I've been in relationships where someone was lying to me. I've lied to myself, for
Mhm.
goodness sake, you know what I
Mhm.
mean?
Mhm.
And so I think when you can always just like fall back on the truth or like
Yeah.
that's your core essence or your personality,
Yeah.
I think then you don't have anything to be worried about because we've always been very truthful with each other. I
Yeah.
think we obviously did partake in somewhat of a romantic relationship for a period of time.
Yeah.
And for me, what was really hard, and I think that it shows the work that I had been on and continue to be on, is I had to tell you
Mhm.
that I didn't want to continue a romantic relationship. And do you
Yeah.
remember my reaction?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it was I kind of, when I first saw you that day, I was like, "Oh, okay. There's something heavy in
Interesting,
on your heart."
because
I
you
was
didn't
like,
act like it.
I didn't act like, maybe because like, why didn't I act like that?
Well, because
I
I had just come
knew.
back from a trip
Yeah.
and you were staying in my apartment. I let you stay in
Mhm.
my apartment,
Yeah.
and I had started seeing someone.
Yeah.
And that was the background, is I had started seeing someone
Mhm.
and I was very intentional about being committed to that person, obviously physically.
Yeah.
And so that was the the recognition that that was my priority
Mhm.
and I needed to end our romantic
Mhm.
relationship. And that was very difficult for me
Yeah.
because I was so unsure of what our relationship would look like after that. And then
Yeah.
also, I think the biggest thing is that I had to stick up for my beliefs and like what
Right.
I was comfortable with. And that's always been the underlying challenge for me, is
Yeah.
to say, like, this is what I need.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
I know that I can't be with multiple people romantically.
Yeah.
I know that that's not in me. And so I
Yeah.
how'd that day go for you?
He broke the news, and I was like,
What
I
was the
think,
f I
I
was at my apartment and then you left and then I
yeah.
called you because
Yeah.
I
Yeah, because what's so funny about it is I was like, okay, there was so many things going on, and I was like, I was racing to this meeting, and I was like, okay, I at least want to stay and like see her, because I obviously we just stayed in your place, and I want to make sure you got home safely and everything like that. But I think one of the things that I had to be honest with myself was, all right, if I don't have true intention here, at some point, um, the true desires of each person will come out. And so I didn't necessarily knew there was a timeline per se, but I knew that we were coming to a point of like, let's put the real cards on the table here.
Mhm, mhm.
And I was okay with that because I know who you are and I know what you need. And I also had the, again, honest moment with myself, was like, can I be someone, or can I portray the characteristics that you need? And for me at the time, I was still transitioning, trying to really feel comfortable in my career. And I don't know if it's just, well, I'll speak for myself, but I feel like it's also a very common male thing where it's like, if things aren't settled career wise, financially wise, then it's like you're not even thinking about, let me lock something down, because I wish we led with more our true feelings and our true desires, as opposed to, is the whole puzzle put together, and then once the puzzle's put together, then we can um, coincide.
Mhm.
And I think that was remnants of my prior relationship, where I spent years setting up the bricks, and like, let's make sure this is done. Let me make sure this is done, and then eventually, once all the work is done, then we should just be happy and okay, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, that's how it should go. Um, I also knew that it took, like, it was hard for you, and
Yeah, I cried.
yeah, and I was like,
It was a
oh my
very
gosh,
vulnerable.
it was, yeah, and I was so, I was appreciative of that, because I know it took
Mhm.
a special type of person to be able to say that to me,
Yeah.
and to have that courage.
Mhm.
And then I was like, wow, I respect that on so many different levels. And so now it just became, okay, you are forever in my heart,
Mhm.
and I'm going to always look out for you and make sure you're good. And I think that's what really opened up our conversations were a lot deeper after that.
Yep.
Um, and what's funny too is I think we knew the good qualities about each other,
Mhm.
and I knew they existed.
Mhm.
Okay, so if I'm going to enter relationships, if I'm going to entertain um, different interactions, I know that it's possible to get a true level of honesty. I know it's possible, and so if I wasn't feeling that, that's just like, okay, well, no time to waste here because this individual might not be ready for that.
Mhm.
And so I think for me at that point, I began like rooting for you. I was in your corner,
Mhm. Mhm.
even though
Stop.
I'm gonna tell you. I mean, I don't know if y'all can hear
No.
it on the podcast, but Allison is a very gorgeous human being, and that was a tough loss for me. But it was needed because I think when you get locked in on the physical aspect, and there isn't true intention, that's not a foundation to really build on.
Yeah.
And eventually it will crumble, and eventually things will get dicey. And what I
We were in
didn't want to
different
have happen,
places.
yeah,
I
what I didn't
mean,
want to have happen is any negative. Like I didn't
but
want
you
it to
were
go
gonna let that
sour.
ride out as long as possible. I was the one that was gonna have to draw the boundary. I'm pretty sure. Which is
Mm,
fine. Which is fine
yeah,
because
I would have let it ride out longer, sure, but I think I knowing you and knowing what you needed at that time, I knew that there was a disconnect.
yeah.
So eventually, like I said, we're gonna have to face this
And I would
process
say
bridge.
that conversation was one of the things that, as we're talking about, building confidence and building trust and building more about who we are as individuals and learning ourselves, I now look back on that pivotal moment, that pivotal conversation, and realize that it's only going to benefit
Hmm.
me if I stand up for what I need.
Yeah,
And like, yeah, it was a hard conversation and the traction maybe afterwards was like a little slippery, but I think
yeah,
we really quickly, I think also it's a testament to you. You're so good at boundaries and you're so mature and you're so understanding that I've never had to worry about
like the reaction.
not even the reaction, just like you still having like ulterior motives because you're a
Mm.
guy, I'm a girl. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Like I've
Hmm.
never had to worry. I've never felt unsafe or
Yeah.
like that you were going to maybe try to sneak one in or whatever
Hmm. Hmm.
whatever because we respect each other.
Yeah, yeah. And especially when you say something like, "Hey, there's somebody that I'm interested in."
Mhm.
I really want to respect that boundary because I know what it takes to build with someone, and it doesn't make anything easier if
Yeah.
there's still like remnants of other things, or if there's still like little playful games going on. You can't truly
Right.
investigate.
And I think
And
that's something that I know. I don't think that other person was doing it, but like that's another conversation. But
yeah,
at least when I show up for relationships and I show up, I want to be authentic and I want to be proud of who I am and how
yeah,
I show up. That's very, very important to me. Like what I say that I'm going to do, I'm going to do. And
yeah,
so that integrity for me is like if I can be firm in that, then whoever's supposed to be, come,
hmm,
leave, it all kind of
yeah. And
happens.
it's wow. It's like I learned a lot from that because it reminded me that it things will work out
Mhm.
if you're honest and you're true.
Mhm.
Yes, it might be difficult. Yes, there may be a couple days of like, because I'm trying to think. When you told me that, like, was there how long before like we were communicating? I feel like I texted you the next day, or I feel like it wasn't like we went on like a dark silence for a
No,
period
I
of
think
time or
you
anything like
called me
that.
the next day and you were like, "Hey, I'm just checking in how you're doing." And
Yeah,
like
yeah,
I was like, "Oh, thank God. Oh, thank
yeah,
God I'm not
yeah.
alienating this person or he's not,
Right. Yeah.
dismissing me and whatever." And
Hmm.
I don't like looking back, I don't remember awkward. I don't remember the next time I saw you. Like that's
Yeah.
how seamless it was
Right.
and how
Right.
dope that is. Like
Yeah.
and that's why we're sitting here with mics in front of us because
Hey,
we've
we've had some.
navigated
Yeah.
I think something that's unique to us
Hmm.
and I mean I cherish the things that we've been able to talk about. And I don't necessarily know. I think because you weren't ready for a relationship and I was,
Hmm.
I mean, ultimately what I would love is that piece and then in combination with our dynamic,
Yeah.
because I always say, like, you are my communication goals for a man, because
Mm.
up until you, I don't think I really saw it possible. Like, I think that you emulate a way of communicating who you are so clearly
Yeah.
that it feels like we're on the same level.
Yeah.
That I can tell you something and you're gonna be able to acknowledge it and comprehend it.
Hmm.
You not only can listen to it, but you can comprehend it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's one of my strengths that I had to realize within myself, because I've had to ask myself, like, why does it seem easier for me to have these type of conversations when I'm talking with my boys and like they're trying to tell me a situation that they're going through. I was like,
Mm.
that was your approach, or that's what you said.
Yeah.
Um, and that happened enough where I was like, oh, this is like a problem. Like, I don't
What
think
do you think the problem is that
that like for some there's a lot of I don't think a lot of men are as honest as they want to be because of fear. Like, they're worried about the reaction. And I
Mm.
was like, the reaction is gonna be the reaction.
Right.
You know,
And if you lie about
if
it,
you lie about, like,
reaction is gonna
you
be
know what I'm
worse.
saying, like, if she's a thrower of objects, like, that plate is coming across the room whether you lie or not. Like, it really is what it is, and I think that's because, again, like, they're fearful of the extreme.
Mhm.
And I think my mindset is I go, in a lot of cases, I go to worst case scenario and then
Mhm.
work back. Like, for example, as we were talking about this podcast, and
Mhm.
we were both a little nervous about, oh my gosh, it's coming up. What are we gonna do? You were a little concerned. I was like, oh, should we do it? Should we not? I was like, okay, let's go to the worst case
Worst
scenario.
case scenario.
Worst case scenario, we walk into a room, there's like 50 people staring at us, we sweating,
Yeah.
and we don't say anything on the mic, but it's like, okay, we still got to sit on these really nice, comfy couches.
Actually, what you said to me is, "You give me the signal, we'll walk out the door." And I was
Hey,
like, "That is
for real.
real." Like, that is, again, honesty, and then that's why I felt, safe and secure of being able to do this with you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
And I think, I mean, folks, as we tell our folks in our circle that,
mhm.
hey, I've told a few people that I'm doing this podcast, and they're like, yes, like, it's been support consistently. Nobody
Right?
was like, what? You're doing a podcast? And it was like, about time almost was the
My
reaction.
friends are like, "Yeah, can you stop talking to me about this and, like, talk to
Yeah.
someone else?" Because
Yeah.
no, that's
Right.
not true.
Because
Uh,
they're not, it's a different level of comfort that, again, took work.
uh-huh.
And
Would you say that your circle of male friends, like, have they ever acknowledged that they, like, are inspired by you or aspire to be like you? Or, like, because you are such a good communicator, and I feel like that, because you know yourself, and
Mhm.
back to, like, the intimacy of knowing yourself, I
Yeah.
think that it comes so naturally to you. Like, do you feel like men see that and they want to lean into it, or are they, like, intimidated by it?
I think I think initially it was, well, my circle of friends are like, they know who I am. And I think they come to me with certain things because they're ready for that dose of the real.
Mm,
They'll communicate with all the other
yep.
they'll get all the
They'll
BS.
get what they wanna
Yeah, they'll
hear
get
from
all the
everyone
junk they want to
else.
hear, and then when they're ready for the gospel, then it's like, okay, well, come on over. Let's really talk about it, because and that's another thing where it took me a while to understand my strength in that, because I was under the impression, like, well, doesn't everybody say this? It doesn't wouldn't everybody tell you that?
Yeah.
And I didn't understand that that's like a gift in a sense, because I'm operating from a almost solution based, and let's work back so that you feel comfortable with your actions in whatever you're going through.
Yeah.
Because if you're just concerned about the outcome, if you're too concerned about the other individual, then you're just kind of trapped in that way. Because I've lived a life where I put others first, and it's exhausting.
Mhm.
And I think it took the um, like the severance of my last relationship, but also like relationship, but it's also relationships with friends, relationships with
Mhm.
family. And I think once realized that power, I became a lot more honest with everyone around me. And
Mhm.
then it just became a thing where, okay, well, this is how I'm going to operate. Um, and it also gave me the, like, it's weird to say, but um, it felt like this is how you're an adult,
Mm.
like this is the next phase of development and conversations. And I noticed, like, having more real conversations with my friends, with my mom. My mom is someone who, my people are from West Africa, and so like there's a lot of um, traditions that are contradictory with relationships and people and what the roles should be.
Mhm.
And I think my mom has also had to realize, because she's obviously I'm her son, and she's gonna naturally be biased and take my side, but I also had to be like, look, like that thing ended, and part of it was my fault.
Mhm.
So I have things that I need to work on,
Yeah.
and part of the things that I need to work on were because of you, and because of how,
How'd she
because
take that?
oh my goodness, she
Isn't it crazy the moment that you have to tell your parents, like,
yeah,
"Hey, I love you, you're my parent, but, like, you kinda fucked me up,
yeah,
and, like, here are the reasons why."
yeah,
And, like, I mean, between our 2 examples, I think that it runs the gamut of taking responsibility.
for real. And because it's when you take someone's side and when you have a deep love for someone, I think you'll want to protect them, right? And sometimes that may mean that you'll give them a soft message,
Mhm.
or you'll withhold things that will hurt them. But I think that only prolongs the issue, right? If I really want to get to the root of something, if I really want to feel like I helped you, because if this is our last conversation that we have,
Mhm.
I don't want to feel like, oh, I should have, could have, I should have told them that. And when I was really thinking that,
Yeah.
like, I want them to leave that conversation with my true opinions on things, and
Yeah.
also leave with something that will help you.
I think it's so interesting too, so we're talking so much about, like, our inner knowing, our inner intimacy with ourselves, but the times that those really show up and the times that we have to dig in deep and evolve is when it comes up against relationships,
Yeah.
whether that's family, friends, romantic,
Hmm.
it's I kind of think of, like, I sometimes go into like a reclusive mode or more, internal. I tend to be a little bit introverted when I'm maybe shedding a layer or progressing.
Yeah.
And then I show back up in relationships and then I'm presented with an opportunity to show up maybe differently than I have.
Hmm.
Um and so I just think it's kind of this like never ending. It sounds exhausting when it kind of is, but it's
Yeah.
also like really exciting because I
Yeah.
like being presented with, I mean, maybe I'm a little masochistic in that way, but I'm like deeply like inspired and
Hmm.
driven to like know myself and
Hmm.
continually evolve. So like that's just built inside of me.
Yeah.
But I love being presented with a opportunity in a relationship that I would have shown up differently and that I'm choosing
Hmm. Hmm.
to act differently. And I think a great example is, I was recently presented with I had spoken some things to some friends and maybe could have kept something a little bit more private. And my friend called me out and she's like, "Hey, did you say this? Because I told you that in confidence." And instead
Hmm.
of being like defensive and being like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa," like
Hmm.
it took,
Yeah.
I remember sitting there and being like, I have to show up
Yeah.
and be the person I want to be. I had to take ownership. I had to apologize.
Hmm.
I had to say, I hear you. I understand why you're upset. I will do better.
Hmm.
Like, and like name all of these things. And I
Yeah.
knew that I was wrong.
Yeah.
And it was one of those like super humbling, humiliating moments. But again, it's that same thing where it's like I showed up with my truth
Yeah.
and we have patched, and
Yeah.
I think that we have a better friendship now
Right.
because of the way that we both handled it. Because I
Yeah.
respect her for coming, because she could have easily, ignored it and been like,
Right.
brushed it under the rug.
or like insert that like gossip and poison elsewhere, and then it'll come
Right.
back
She
around
could
even
have
10
been
times
talking shit
worse.
about
Yeah.
me behind my back
Yeah.
because, she felt validated. Like, if she's
Mhm.
going to run her mouth, then I'll run
Yeah.
mine.
Yeah.
And I really respect her for standing up for herself. So she's emulating who I want to be.
Mhm. Mhm.
And then I had to, step up and be like, no, this is my bad. And
Yeah.
I take full responsibility.
Yeah.
And taking full responsibility and sitting in that,
Mhm.
ugh.
Yeah, it's like yeah, I think, I have some similar examples to that, when I go back home to the Midwest, it's almost like, for example, I just went home for, like, the holidays, right?
Yeah.
And me and my boys were all chilling, at a spot, and we're all talking, and we're all like, there's a lot of noise in the room,
Yeah.
and then eventually, I kinda look at one of my best friends, and I could tell he wants to have a private conversation, so, like, "Okay, let's get up and
Because you're
remove."
so good at reading people. I
Yeah,
mean,
it's
maybe I
like
would notice that, but like,
yeah, because I was like, "Something's going on," and I also know him, and he's comfortable with certain people, disclosing different information because he's the type of dude that, quote, unquote, "doesn't show weakness,"
mhm,
and
mhm,
has a
mhm.
struggle with, quote, unquote, "being soft."
That's our second episode, I'm pretty sure, is we're gonna talk about masculine, feminine
Oh, boy.
energy. We already got
Right?
when your response is, "Oh boy," that means we have some
Uh,
content,
it's
but
like it's sad because yeah, I think it's a misinterpretation or a misunderstanding of what power means, right? Like power is associated with holding on to things and being quote unquote strong and I'm putting on my shoulders
yeah.
because I'm yeah, get
But
familiar with that.
he
Yeah,
pulled you aside?
he had like a real situation that he was going through, and he also knew that I had gone through something similar, but my experience I didn't necessarily want to use as like, hey, this is what you should do.
Mhm,
I used it as an opportunity, like, hey, this is what I had to go through to get to that outcome.
mhm,
Because you're just focused on the outcome. Like, how did you, for example, like I co-parent with someone that, um, we essentially had one interaction with each
mhm.
other, and it
Which he
was,
told me on his first date. That's how real we got on the
oh my
first
god,
date.
yeah, it was
I
like,
was like, "Okay, okay, okay."
believe it or not, like that, you know, like I don't want to say like a male nightmare, but like one of the things that is a fear
Uh-huh.
is, from a guy, like, getting that phone call from somebody be like, "Hey, I don't know if you remember me, but, I'm pregnant." It's like, "What?" And so, I mean, the amount of shame, like because I view myself as, like, that's the type of stuff that happened to somebody else,
Mhm,
or, like, I would never put myself in that situation. And again, when you have these expectations on how things are gonna go, and you truly believe them when your world is turned upside down, it's if you're not like standing solid within who you are, you
mhm,
can get very lost and you
mhm,
can start, for me, piling on emotions and ideas and feelings that aren't true.
mhm,
Um, and so going from that to, now I'm so grateful and a very like solid and strong foundation co-parenting relationship. But it took all honesty in the world. It took me being accepting that I initially had the wrong reaction. And fortunately, I'm in this with somebody who is very mature and a beautiful soul, and one that I'm very grateful
mhm.
that this happened because the outside world just sees how it's going. It's like so smooth. Like, how did it
Yeah.
did it just start like that? And I was like, no. Like, you want to know how it started?
You are co-parenting goals for sure.
It started with like mayhem. It started with you
What
know,
but so would you consider, like, that one of the moments that you've had to really, like, dig deep? So, like,
yeah, oh
your
yeah,
yeah, obviously
yeah,
your break from your engagement,
yeah.
and then would this be kind of the other
Yeah, that was the next for
jewel on
sure.
the crown of
For sure. It was like, "All right, George, like, well, how will your story be written?"
Mm,
And that's the thought that I had, and especially because it was a little traumatic for me, right? I grew up very distant from my dad, and I remember being a kid telling myself, like, "When I have kids, like, I'm gonna be, like, it's
yeah,
gonna be under a house, and we're all gonna be a happy family." And again, that expectation, and then boom, this happens, and it's like, all right, well, I almost went to the opposite extreme. Like, okay, I'm gonna do everything opposite of him, right?
mm,
Like every action that he took, I'm gonna do the opposite. I'm gonna do the opposite. I'm gonna do the opposite. But I knew that I had to be comfortable with the fact that this is not the way I saw it. So the task at hand now is, again, build it how you want to, how do you want the story to be written?
Mhm.
How do you want your child's memory of you to be at this stage in his life? And just focus on that. One of my best friends is a family attorney, and when this happened, I kind of called him. I was like, okay, let's go to worst case scenario.
Yeah.
What happens if like I'm in court, or what happens if this happens, or how do I like just all these random thoughts. And he hit me with this line that was like, hey, like the real is, your life with your child will be more or less kind of scheduled.
Mhm.
And that like broke me. It's like, what? And I had to sit with that for a while, but I had to be honest with myself in terms of, even if that is the case, and I thought about my childhood, and I thought about the moments that I even remember, right? Like, how far back does my memory go? And I think the moments of like discomfort wasn't necessarily the distance. It was when I did have a reaction or interaction with my father, was it good?
Mhm.
Did it make me smile?
Uh-huh.
And I had to realize, like, oh, that's the power. Because if I'm fueling this situation with love and I'm being honest with myself, like the stars will align in some way, shape, or form. And man, it took a lot of just brute honesty with myself. It took some therapy. It took talking to all of my friends, and I have some friends with multiple baby mamas, and
Mhm.
um in what from the outside view, like what looks very toxic.
Mhm.
And so I'm operating based off that fear,
Mhm.
but it's like that doesn't have to be my reality.
Yeah.
And so let me take every action possible to ensure that me and my partner in this, like, we have to do this together.
Mhm.
And also, like, let's get all the uncomfortable conversations out the way before you even have a baby bump.
Mhm. Mhm.
Like,
Mhm.
I remember telling her, like, hey, like, there's a high chance that we have separate families.
Mhm.
How do you feel about that?
And I mean, that's a question. I think when we're talking about building honesty, it's also sometimes about asking questions and being honest.
Yeah.
I've had conversations where I'm like, "What's your biggest fear right now?" My biggest fear is XYZ. And
Yeah.
I think that just kind of breaks down those barriers of trying to act like everything's going to be okay or that we'll figure it out. It's like, "No, this is real
Yeah.
and we have to talk about what we're afraid of because we're put in a situation now where
Yeah. This is real life. This is not a drill.
this is not, this is
You
not a
know?
drill.
This is real
We are
life.
living the human experience."
For real. And I think especially because, again, where we come from, right?
Yeah.
Build that family, get married,
Yep. We
get
got
the
some real cookie
house.
cutter.
Real just, oh God. It's just like this is one way of doing everything. And if you don't follow that path, like you're an outsider, you're an outcast. Like
Yeah, or you're weird or
you're
something's wrong
weird.
with you. Or
Exactly.
like, I mean, I got divorced at 28 years old. Being a divorcee in the Midwest at
Oh,
28?
it's like you got a black mark on you almost.
Like, what's wrong with you?
Yep. Yep.
But like in that moment, like now looking back, there was so much right with me. And I'm so proud of myself
Hmm.
for standing up for. I mean, I still wasn't able to articulate who I was, but I knew that path was not going to be right for me. And I think that's the moral of all of our examples that we've just laid out is
Yeah.
like, one, you have to be true to yourself.
Have
And in
to.
order to be true to yourself, you have to know yourself.
Hmm.
And I think the other part of it that's so important is like reaction time.
Yeah.
Like I've heard from you a couple times now. You're like, I had to dig deep. I had to take a moment to pause. I had to like reflect.
Hmm.
And I think in moments like that where you have to step up and be a different version or be a version that you don't even know but you want to be,
Hmm.
it's like it's that pause and that comprehension that you have a choice.
Yes.
I think so often we get in this like
Yes.
mindset where it's like, nope, this is just how it
It
has to
has to
be and
be.
this is how
Yeah.
I have to react. It's like
Hmm.
sometimes that pause might be 1 second,
Yeah.
but it's like it's that shift of making a choice and a direction change, even if it's like 1 degree,
Mhm.
so that you can show up better for yourself. And I think that builds self-confidence. I think it also brings the people
Yeah.
who are supposed to be in your life, because I would say my 20s were filled with superficial, not aligned people. But the
Mm.
more and more I grew into who I was, the more and more I felt seen, the more and more I felt like I could have conversations like this.
Yeah.
Because I don't do surface level casual conversations. I want to dig in. I
Yeah.
want to be
Let's talk
real.
about the real.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like, I don't
And
care what your favorite color is.
for like and I think, throughout my dating experiences, like, yeah, all that stuff is, I'll read your profile to see what your favorite
Sure.
breakfast is, or
Right.
if you like coffee, or like, who cares? Because I need to know sooner rather than later, can we go through life? And to me, like, life is good and bad, it's ups and downs. And um I think in my journey to get comfortable with my co-parenting situation it had to be rooted in honesty, and it had to also be rooted in support,
Mhm.
because one of the things that allowed both of us to just breathe and sigh deeply is like, look, we have to understand this is a forever thing.
Yeah.
So I need to forever be in your corner. You
Mhm.
have to forever be in mine.
Mhm.
Uh, we also, it's two different races, right? So it's like I have to defend you
Mhm.
against my circle, and you have
Mhm.
to defend me against yours.
Yeah, there's a lot of dynamics there.
And we have to again flush all of that. What questions do you have? What are you worried about? What are you concerned about? Because I mean, countless examples, right, of that going wrong.
Mhm.
And fortunate or unfortunate, I had those examples around me. So I could be like, okay, I'm definitely not going to be in that situation.
Yeah.
Definitely not going to say that to my partner. I'm definitely not going to create that environment. And so I knew what to avoid, which meant, again, you have to set this up and how you want it to go. Because even now, we've, fast forward, we've gone on like trips together.
I
And
know. You
I
guys are
think a lot of
amazing.
people, we did a little like moment. We just celebrated my son's birthday in Costa Rica. And uh, so many people were reaching out like, how are y'all doing this? Like,
Because you
what,
have boundaries
what
and
do
you
you
know
do?
yourself and you're
Exactly.
honest.
Yeah. And so it's like, and then my boys would be like, so you ain't gone back, you ain't go back,
Jesus.
y'all haven't rekindled anything. It's
You
like,
guys
no.
only have like one question. It's like, are you getting it or not? Like, what's
I was
wrong with
like,
you?
and then when my boys told me that, I was like, see, that's your problem.
Exactly.
That's the reason why your baby mama is tripping right now, because you keep opening that door. And it's
Look,
like, you gotta shut that down, because there's
having
no
self-control. Like,
for real. Because again, part of I think part of setting those boundaries is there's a respect level.
yeah.
Because once you set the boundary, and you communicate it,
Yep.
which is another key part, because people
For sure.
are operating in their
Yeah.
head all the time and like,
Yeah.
how do you not know my
This
boundary?
is the way I
You
feel.
can't read my mind right now. Like,
Yeah.
no, nobody's a mind reader. I need to communicate exactly what my boundaries are, and then the cards are on the table.
Mhm.
So now if you violate,
Yeah.
you violated.
Yeah. And that's that self like acknowledgement.
Yeah.
As cliched as it is, we're obviously in a new year, and I don't necessarily. I mean, it's like a nice turning point.
Yeah.
But what would you say is like one goal that you might have in the upcoming year as you're, evolving and you're growing? Like, what's like a to
Yeah.
do, or what's a mission of yours?
Yeah, so this is definitely a new year, and I have a birthday coming up in this month, but
Hey.
I just got done with a plant journey,
Which will be another episode.
which will be a whole different episode.
We got episodes lined up, everyone. Make sure you subscribe.
Yes, for sure. So I was in the jungle, and I was sitting in Buddha. No, I was with some very
We'll get
how do I
into the
even describe it?
people.
But like,
Yeah.
it was an experience where everybody that showed up was open.
Mhm.
And I think when you're in that type of space and that type of energy, like, there's no real worry.
Mhm.
And so part of my desire to do that was, I'm at the phase now where I'm really trying to, like you said, know yourself.
Yeah.
And I'm intent with that process, as opposed to letting time and events and milestones determine who I am. It's like, no, I can solve that question this weekend if possible.
Damn. I
You know
like
what I
that.
mean?
Yeah.
And
You're in the
also,
driver's seat.
yes, like you
Yeah.
can take control of this process as opposed to waiting for some other exterior event to happen, because through that I just had like time to sit with myself. And for me, what I didn't realize is I needed time to rest,
hmm
literally do nothing, literally sleep.
Would you say that like rest is your goal of this year?
For sure.
Yeah.
One of the things that I left that retreat with is move 10% slower in everything.
Wow.
Do everything 10% slower. Not only to really, introduce a sense of enjoyment in
Mhm.
whatever it is you're going through, good or bad, but also to give yourself time to actually be present.
Mhm.
Because I think if you follow a lot of just meditation or self-growth, like you see the term be present is
Right.
it's littered all through
So
everything,
cliche.
right?
Right.
Be present, be still.
Well,
But
we're all just on our phones or we're
right,
watching TV. Like that's not. Yeah.
we're inundated with just like we can't even focus for long periods of time
Right.
now, right? And so that's something that I definitely want to implement. I've had this, like a lot of us, we look at our bodies and we want to change things and we associate these negative feelings for things. But I think I've now really set goals with my physical appearance that are gradual.
hmm
Um, I want to become healthier. I want to change my diet. I want to look more physically, in my head, like myself.
hmm
And with that goal, nowhere in that is a deadline,
Mm.
right?
Okay, I like that.
It's simply,
It's like surrendering.
I want to do this.
Uh-huh.
I want to look like this.
hmm
And as long as I'm intent in that, eventually it'll happen.
Yeah.
It'll happen maybe in 6 months, but it'll happen maybe in 6 years.
So if
Who
you
knows?
had like a journal and you were like writing the to-do list,
Yeah.
how would you synthesize that into like one sentence?
I want to be intent with who George is becoming, and I really want to walk my path. I really want to love myself
Mm.
and
Period.
all phases.
Yeah.
I really want to just believe it too.
Uh-huh.
Know it.
Yeah.
Almost. Yeah. So
Well, I'm excited for
that's
you
the journey.
I think that once you set those intentions of that's your next evolution,
Yeah.
I think then the universe conspires to present to you opportunities
Yep.
to show up.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
well, maybe we'll do like a year-end recap, and
Oh, for sure.
we'll revisit this
We'll
and
do
see.
we'll do quarterly check-ins.
Great,
if
great.
needed. But
Both
no.
of us from our previous corporate backgrounds.
Oh my gosh.
Well, I
Corporate
think
America is
we're
a whole different episode.
no, we're
too.
not.
We can dive into corporate America.
No, stop. We're done.
And that poison too. But
Okay.
but for you, like, where, with you, Allison, like in this new year, I know you're very intent, and I know it's been inspiring to see you dive into your journey and what you're going through. Like, what are some things that you want to put on the horizon for yourself and
I think it's
accomplish?
repeated efforts of showing up for myself. I think I know who I am.
Mhm.
And I think that I've even maybe like last month, I deviated from that. And
Mhm.
it brought results that were not optimal. And so I have to take responsibility for I'd set a boundary for myself. I went against that boundary and the outcome was not what I wanted.
Yeah.
And so I think for me, it's just it's almost like repeating that muscle.
Yeah.
And that's the muscle that I want to continue to build. I feel
Yeah.
like I have a little bit of muscle there,
Mhm.
but that's what I need to continue to work on.
Mhm.
Because I like at this phase, I know who I am. And I think that the times that I've deviated from that now are not optimal. And the times that I've
Mhm.
leaned into that and stuck true into that, it's transpired into things that are more positive. So for
Yeah.
me, 2023 is about the year of that consistency.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Stay the course.
stay the course.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Amazing.
Well, I'm so glad we did this.
Wow.
Wow.
Episode 1.
Episode 1 in the bag.
Oh my gosh, it's like on the dot.
Yeah. Amazing. Of course it is.
Oh yeah, this is easy. I thought podcasts were hard. What's going on here? This is smooth.